Harvey Oswald was murdered in a Dallas police basement. Now, this week, the last surviving passenger in the car with President Kennedy is claiming that the Warren Commission was wrong and that more than one person was involved. Tonight's newsmaker has also been making that charge since 1963. Author and investigator Harold Weisberg from Frederick spoke with Newsnight producer Steve Kramer about what he calls the government whitewash and the November '63 coup d'etat.
In 20 years, most of the people who were around for the assassination will have passed on. Most of the people in America will have been born after the assassination. What will history record about the assassination? Will they really know what really happened in Dallas?
History records what the people don't believe. The history books all say that Oswald was a lone assassin because otherwise they don't get published. But 9 people out of 10 don't believe that story. Now, the time when that last poll that I know about was taken was the time when they had the most powerful propaganda on behalf of the official story. Posner's mistitled book, Case Closed. CBS used Posner, and CBS sponsored the poll, and 9 out of 10 people didn't believe the official story. Now, this is a frightful thing to happen in a democratic society, and for the government not to react to that, not to respond to that. You know, the government can't solve the crime now, but they can say, we made a mistake and apologize for it.
Can anybody solve the crime now?
Anybody what?
Can anybody solve the crime?
No, it's not possible.
Do you know exactly what happened in Dallas?
No.
Do you have any idea?
Yes,
What do you think happened?
I have some suspicions, but it's unfair to air suspicions without proof, and I have no proof.
No proof.
But let me give you a general statement on that. Under our system of government, the assassination of any president is a de facto coup d'etat. It automatically changes policy. Under our system, the man who is nominated for president picks out a man whose views are different than his, and he can appeal to a different part of the electorate. So you automatically get a president through the assassination who on some things agrees with the man who he replaces and on some things doesn't. And with Johnson, there were a lot of things he didn't agree with Kennedy on, and one of them was Vietnam. Kennedy was getting out of Vietnam after the election, and Johnson had 500,000 men there. So you see, this is a major change in policy. And that is inevitable with any assassination of any president. The 2 men are not identical in their views. The president always picks a man who can appeal to a different part of the electorate. So any assassination of any president is, as a matter of practical consideration, a coup d'etat.
But your investigation in the last 35 years, it's shown that there was an intensive cover-up in the investigation.
Yes.
But does any of your investigation reveal any closer to the clues of what happened in Dallas?
No.
So you have not, in all the papers and all the files and all the records and all the interviews, you're not any closer
this goes back to what I told you to begin with. A decision was made as soon as Oswald was killed not to investigate the crime itself. So none of these records hold anything about the crime itself. They tried to put the hat on Oswald, and you know, some of the investigation is unbelievable. People they should have spoken to, they never spoke to, for example. People who had nothing to say, they go page after page after page of the transcript where it's just trash. One of the examples of this is a policeman, a motorcycle policeman who's now dead. His name was Douglas Jackson, and he was so proud of being an escort for the president, and he was one of the 2 on the president's right on the motorcade, because it was the second time that the president's life, so to speak, had been entrusted into his hand. The other time was when Sam Rayburn was sick and Kennedy went down to see him. And then the Secret Service liked this man, and they put him in charge of getting a motorcade together, a protection for the corpse on the way to the airport. He saw what happened. He was one of the 2 closest to the president when it happened, and the police never questioned him. The Secret Service never questioned him. The FBI never questioned him. The Warren Commission never questioned him. When he got home, he's a professional policeman. When he got home that night, he wrote a lengthy statement in longhand. And I found out about its existence from the FBI. He offered it to the FBI, and they wouldn't even take it. When I had my own way of getting a friend to get it for me, and I have it. Now, he saw Governor Conley hit by a separate shot. That destroys the Warren report. The officer next to him was named Jim Cheney. He saw the president shot below the shoulder in the back. That destroys the Warren report. But these things don't tell us who did it, which is where your question began. I don't want to deceive the people about this. And I've turned down a number of things on television where I was afraid of being misused that way. The one thing that we can hope to is that the people enough of the people can learn some of the truth. It's the only way there can be any assurance, if there is any such thing, of this not happening again. The assassination of any president, whether it doesn't make any difference what his party is, I think, the most subversive of crimes in a society like ours. We don't want that to happen again. We don't want, and when I was able to get around and speak to colleges, the assassination of President Kennedy was one of the two things that caused most dissension, most disenchantment, and most dissatisfaction with the government. It and the Vietnam War. And there were some places where it was first and the Vietnam War was second. It's not healthy for a democratic society to have its young people disenchanted with the government. The government ought to have the trust of the people, but the government has to earn the trust of the people to have it, or to expect to have it. And it can't earn the trust of the people by deceiving the people, as it did with the Kennedy assassination.
Do you think in the future it will come out exactly what happened in Dallas, or is that gone forever? Do you think anybody will come forward, or if anybody writes a book or comes out and says it, could it be believed?
I hope it happens, but I don't expect it. I don't expect it.
If it happened, where would it come from?
Let me explain something to you. The official investigation did turn up certain solid evidence. It wasn't always spoken about truthfully, but it did turn up evidence. And any solution has to be in conformity with that evidence. Any of the people who perpetrated the crime have to have been in a position to do what that evidence proves. Now, there's so much dishonesty about this. Let me give you one example of what I mean. They say Oswald took the rifle into the building that morning and put it up on the 6th floor and shot the president from there. There was one man saw him enter the building, and only one man. His name was Jack Doherty, and he swore, and he was standing at the door to watch the people coming in. He swore that Oswald had nothing in his hands. Now, before Oswald got there, he had a ride. The sister of the man who gave him the ride saw Oswald walking there, carrying a grocery bag thing with his hand and swinging it, and cleared the ground. The rifle, when it was taken apart, was 38 inches long. It wouldn't fit in that bag. The man who gave him the ride, his name is Bill Wesley Fraser, saw Oswald with the bag. He put it on the back seat. Oswald walked to the building while the man stayed behind to charge his battery up. He said Oswald had the package cupped in his hand and under his armpit. That's 2 feet. You can't get 38 inches in there. So you see, there's no proof that Oswald got the rifle into the building.
Do you think Oswald had nothing to do with it?
Oswald couldn't have had anything to do with it.
Nothing at all? He wasn't even a part of it?
Nothing at all.
But do you feel bad that the way the history books are written right now, Oswald assassinated President Kennedy? That's what they say in them. If they say him now, 35 years afterwards, it'll be more of a fact at 100 years.
There's nothing we can undo to undo the lies. But I think that the great good sense of the American people is standing them in good sense, and most of them don't believe it. But let me give you, try and give you a picture of this, of the actualities that getting the truth out involves. I wrote the first book on the Warren Report and on the assassination. I worked very fast. The book was finished in the middle of February 1965. I got over 100 rejections internationally without a single adverse editorial comment. You would think that a book about the assassination of the president is what the publishers would fight for. Nobody wanted it. And I think they had a gut understanding, and they were afraid. Several of them told me that afterwards, but not then. Now that is so abnormal in our life. The book was a success. Not a paper reviewed it. You see, there is this reality. You can't publish a history book that will tell the young people the truth about the Kennedy assassination. You can't get it published, is what I mean. No publisher will take it.
You spent nearly half your life doing research on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Has it been worth it?
Yes, let me answer that two different ways. First of all, the founding fathers, who I think were the greatest political thinkers in history, made this a responsibility of people when they can do it, and especially of writers, with the First Amendment. They guaranteed as much as they could that people would be free to do this without interference from the government. That was essential in their concept for the working of democratic society. So in that sense, yes. In the sense that a record exists, yes. And the record does exist. It's a very, very large record. My historian friends tell me they don't know of anything like it being done in history because of what I've done that hasn't been published. It is important that the information to be accessible. Most people don't know about it, but it is accessible. I've distributed a lot of it, and it will exist. On a personal level, it has meant much to me, because I am the first member of my family going back to Adam and Eve, who was born in their freedom. And that became mine without my having done a damn thing to earn it or to justify it. And it gave me a chance to pay back a little bit for what became mine by the accident of my birth. I'll never know how many relatives I have died in Europe or were killed by Hitler. And I would have been if my parents hadn't emigrated. So it means that to me. And I think that as a matter of a record for history, in the course of time, it will have some value. It has value now for anybody who wants to look at it.
What do you want people to remember about Harold Weisberg?
You know, I never thought of that. I'd say that he tried to meet his responsibilities as a citizen, as a writer. The duty of a writer is to write. And of course, if you write novels, that's one thing, but if you feel it's nonfiction, that's something else. And when I was a young man, I was an investigative reporter. That was my kind of writing. I tried. I did make the system work once, too. Congress amended the law, the Freedom of Information Act. I was Andy Jackson's one determined man. And it cited one of my lawsuits in which the FBI was very dishonest as requiring the amending of the investigatory files exemption of the Freedom of Information Act so that the records of the FBI and the CIA and similar agencies would be accessible to the people under the act. So yes, I did make that system work. I established a couple precedents of law, including one on copyright, in the course of this litigation. Yes, that I think that helps. That's good for the country, that kind of thing. We never know about these things. We never know what the value is. All we know is what we think they can be. But I think that anything that makes information available to the people in a society like ours is valuable.
Do you think, I know we touched on it a little bit before, that anybody alive today knows what really happened in Dallas?
We have no way of knowing. I think the chances are that some do, but we have no way of knowing who they are. This was not just one lone nut knocking off a guy he liked, by the way. And just so there won't be any misunderstanding on the part of your people, the Warren Commission records showed that Oswald was not a communist, but he was an anti-communist, strongly anti-communist. We don't know who was responsible, but if we assume that it was a coup d'etat, and I do, that's not one or two people. And it is possible that some of those who were privy may be alive, but we have no way of knowing. There are no leads on that. There was no investigation that can point to anybody or to any force.
But do you think somebody out there will come forward the next 10, 20 years and say, I was there, or I knew this, or I have proof? Or do you think that proof is all gone?
You're asking somebody to commit suicide, to have himself hated in history like nobody's ever been hated. No, I don't expect that. Assuming, and I don't think that anybody's left any memoirs in which he boasts about it.
But you talked about, in your investigation, when you went through all the files and all the Freedom of Information fights, and the FBI called you one of the most knowledgeable persons.
Let me correct you on that.
Okay.
They said I knew more about it than anybody working for the FBI.
Okay.
With
all that, do you feel that any of the people who were responsible for the cover-up knew what happened, or knows what happened?
No, I don't think that those responsible for the cover-up had anything to do with the assassination.
Then why were they covering it up? Just to get on with life?
That's a very good question. It has several answers. With the FBI, Hoover was not about to admit that something like this could happen, and he didn't know about it in advance. You know, he talked about all the penetration he had of all the various groups. And the government was not about to admit that there was a coup d'etat. You see, Johnson would have had no legitimacy. We would have had a government that had no legitimacy. These are not simple things. This was a very complicated thing. Just imagine if we had a president of the United States and somebody said that he became president by a coup d'etat. He could never have been an effective president.
Even if he wasn't involved with the coup d'etat?
I'm sure he was not involved. I'm absolutely certain that he was not involved. He just became president by it. But the point is that if you had people believe that the government was responsible for the assassination, you wouldn't have question of Johnson's legitimacy.
Do you think Johnson believed in the cover-up?
He knew there was one. Certainly.
Why was
I've got records. I've got records.
Why do you think he went along with it?
Political expediency. Johnson told Senator Russell, for example, that he didn't believe in the single bullet theory either. Johnson believed there was a conspiracy. I have a record in which Johnson is quoted as saying, and this is an FBI record by one of the top men in the FBI. Johnson is quoted as saying he believed that there was a conspiracy and that the CIA was part of it. That doesn't constitute proof that the CIA was part of it. But that was what Johnson said. These things were not said to be said in public, and they were never said in public. But they were said. And the man who put that on paper was named Carter DeLoach, and he was the number 3 man in the FBI then. And I have it. So you see, what I've been trying to do, because to begin with, I was hoping that I could solve the crime or something like that. But before long, I realized that was not possible. So I've just dedicated myself to making as much of a record as one man can, so that there will be a record for history. No more than that.
After 9 books and 35 years, is America any closer to finding out what really happened in Dallas?
Just that it was a coup d'etat.
Nothing more specific?
No. You can't do any more than that. You can theorize, but you deceive yourself. A theory has to be based on some kind of evidence.
And you have no evidence.
There's no evidence to base it on. So it's not a theory, it's a belief.
You have a belief, but no evidence that would pinpoint it anywhere.
No, I don't know of any. No, I've never seen any in any of those records. I haven't seen any that's credible in any of the books. All of the books that come up with theories are faulty, very faulty. They vary in how faulty. And I think that a lot of it varies with the extent of the ego and the lack of control over it. Because most of these people don't know what they're doing.
When we're all gone from this earth, 100 years from now, and the history books say Oswald shot Kennedy.
We don't know what's going to happen, but the official record is that Oswald did not and could not have shot Kennedy, and the government knew it. I just gave you one proof. It was impossible for the best shots in the country to duplicate the shooting attributed to Oswald. I gave you proofs before. The Commission's own reconstruction of Oswald's alleged escape proved he couldn't have done it. And that doesn't count what they left out that he had to do. No, they're getting away with it. They have gotten away with it. Except that, by and large, the American people just don't trust it. And I think that's a tribute to the people.
And that's it for this edition of Newsnight Maryland. But on Monday, in our Maryland Life segment,